When first we came in sight of Seringapatam, we were astonished at the boldness of the city's situation. It sat on an island in the river Corvery, its walls bristling with guns, and the great mosque and palace rising behind the fortifications. Even before our trenches were begun, the enemy's rockets hissed constantly over our lines, bursting in showers of fire amongst our tents. The heat was stifling, the air heavy with the scent of powder and the stench of unburied cattle. We began our parallels on the night of the 5th of February. The Mysoreans were alert and defiant. Their guns swept the ground with deadly precision, and their rocketeers fired incessantly. The noise at night was tremendous, the whistling of their iron rockets followed by the crash of our own mortars. Several of our men were horribly burned or pierced by flying fragments. By the 18th we had advanced our batteries close enough to batter their outer works. The trenches were knee-deep in muddy water from the Corvery's channels. We worked under fire, spade in one hand, musket near the other. Every evening the enemy attempted sorties, fierce rushes with tulwars flashing and war cries echoing across the glacis. Many a brave sepoy and grenadier fell holding the line in those night attacks. On the 6th of March the heavy guns opened in earnest. I shall never forget the thunder of our artillery echoing off the river banks. Great gaps appeared in their bastions, yet Tipu's men laboured all night to repair them. Rockets and fireballs arced from the walls, and the sky was a canopy of sparks. It was clear the Sultan meant to resist to the last. We heard later that Lord Cornwallis had negotiated with Tipu Sultan's envoys. When the news of the armistice spread, a cheer ran down our trenches. On the 24th of March the firing ceased, and the silence after so many weeks of thunder was uncanny. Then we watched the extraordinary sight of Tipu's 2 young sons delivered to our camp as hostages. The Mysorean princes rode in state, richly dressed, while our soldiers lined the way, in awe. Even the roughest private lowered his voice at that spectacle. Thus ended the siege. We had suffered much from sickness, heat, and constant fire, but the city stood before us battered and humbled. I shall never forget the sight of its bastions crumbled by our guns, nor the endless nights spent crouched in the trenches under a rain of rockets and shot.
From the moment we opened our first batteries against the fortress of Seringapatam, I knew this was to be unlike any siege I had yet seen. The Sultan's rocketeers were so expert that scarcely an hour passed without one of their missiles shrieking through the air and bursting amongst our working parties. The sound was like nothing from Europe, a wild, fluttering howl followed by a shower of sparks and iron splinters. More than one man was transfixed or set ablaze before our eyes. Our own guns were dragged up with infinite toil. The ground was rocky, riven by channels of the Corvery, and all the while swept by shot from the city. We constructed our batteries under cover of fascines and gabions, yet no sooner had a gun opened than the enemy replied with astonishing rapidity. The Sultan's gunners were well served and resolute. Their balls ploughed through our breastworks and hurled stones and sandbags into the air. I spent most of my nights directing the bombardment. The flashes from our mortars lit the dark sky, and the crash of iron on masonry echoed across the river like thunder. Through my telescope, I could see their ramparts crumbling by day and rebuilt by night. I recall one evening when a particularly heavy salvo toppled a section of their outer bastion. The cheering of our sepoys was drowned by a sudden storm of rockets, which hissed down like fiery serpents. Life in the trenches was misery itself. The heat of the Indian sun by day, the stinking dampness by night, the swarms of flies and mosquitoes, and the constant fatigue of working under fire wore us to skeletons. Many were struck down by fever, others by musket balls or flying stones. Yet the men bore it with a doggedness I have rarely seen matched. When news reached us of the negotiations and eventual armistice with Tipu Sultan, The relief was palpable. For weeks we had expected to storm the breaches, which would have been a bloody affair indeed. Instead, we were treated to the curious spectacle of the Sultan's 2 sons arriving as hostages, children yet dressed like princes of Persia. Our whole army turned out to see them. It was an ending as strange as the siege itself. Looking back, I can say the defense of Seringapatam was resolute and gallant, and our own troops endured hardships equal to any in the annals of the company. But it was the rockets I shall remember most, the fiery symbols of an enemy's ingenuity, and the heralds of what would later be turned upon our foes in Europe.
We marched up to our ground before Seringapatam on the 4th of February and could scarcely believe such a fortress existed. The river divided and rejoined about the city, making it seem like an island of stone and guns. Across the broad plain the Sultan's banners fluttered, and every parapet glittered with men and cannon. The first days were the worst. We dug our trenches under a blazing sun and within range of their whole line. The noise of their iron rockets was a horror to unaccustomed ears, a screeching, skipping thing that darted along the ground or shot into the air, trailing sparks before bursting. More than once, one of those infernal contraptions went clean through a man's haversack or tore off a limb. We had never met the like in Europe. Our work was constant. 1 hour spade, next hour musket. If we raised our heads too high over the parapet, a sniper's ball was sure to find us. By night, the Mysoreans crept forward in small parties to fire into the trenches or fling firepots and granados. Once they charged our working party outright, and we had a sharp skirmish with bayonets among the gabions until they were driven off. The smell of the place is what lingers in my memory. Damp earth, sweat, the reek of powder, and the sickly stench of carcasses left by the retreating cattle. Men fell to fever, to sunstroke, to flying stones from their guns. Yet we kept at it. The general himself walked the lines to hearten us, and the sepoys worked shoulder to shoulder with the Highlanders. By early March, our batteries battered breaches in their walls, and we expected to storm the place within days. Then word spread of negotiations. When firing ceased, the stillness was strange, almost painful, after the roar of so many guns. And then the 2 young princes came, splendidly dressed, seated on richly trapped elephants, guarded by our grenadiers. The whole camp was hushed as they passed, and even the roughest privates saluted them. It was a moment I shall never forget. We left the ground around Seringapatam, worn, scorched, and riddled with trenches, but our colours were flying, and our honour satisfied. I have fought in sieges before, but never one so curious, so terrible, and yet so full of spectacle as this,